We were hanging Christmas fairy lights when she finally whispered, "He doesn't love me, Miss Marlowe, he just loves my bank balance." And the way her hands shook, I knew she wasn't exaggerating. My name is Attorney Ivy Marlowe, and this is one of the most painful domestic betrayal cases I have ever handled. Before we begin, if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, make sure to subscribe to Voices of Courtroom, where real cases reveal the truths people hide behind closed doors. Now, let me take you to the day Emily Carter walked into my office. The first snowfall of December was drifting past my window when I saw her through the frosted glass of my door. A quiet, hesitant silhouette. She stood there for almost 10 seconds, one hand on the doorknob, the other clutching her coat tightly around her, like she needed to hold herself together before stepping inside. When the door finally opened, a soft gust of cold air followed her in. Snowflakes were melting in her hair, her cheeks were flushed from the wind or crying. It was hard to tell. But what struck me was the way she stood, half inside, half out, like she wasn't sure she deserved to ask for help. I motioned gently. "It's okay, come in." She walked toward the chair across from my desk and lowered herself slowly, like someone whose entire body was tired not physically but emotionally. She placed her designer handbag beside her chair with trembling fingers. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes traveled around the room, the shelves, the certificates, the small lamp glowing softly on my desk. She wasn't looking for Dacre. She was looking for safety, reassurance, permission. Finally, in a thin, apologetic voice, she whispered, "I don't want to waste your time." I hear that sentence more than any other, and always from the people who need help the most. "You're not wasting anything," I said softly. "Start whenever you're ready." She took a shaky breath, and then the truth tumbled out of her. "Miss Marlowe, my husband isn't with me because he loves me. He's with me because I'm the bank." She said it like a confession she'd been hiding behind her ribs for years. Her face crumpled for just a second, so quickly she tried to hide it, but the pain was unmistakable. She looked down at her hands. "He used to make me feel so special, like I mattered, like I was the only steady part of his chaotic world, and now I'm realizing I wasn't his wife, I was his financial plan." Her voice broke at the end. She told me how she and Daniel met at a small charity gala 9 years ago. He was charming, magnetic, the kind of man who walked into a room like he belonged there even if he didn't. People gravitated toward him. He made her laugh, he made her feel seen. "I grew up stable," she said quietly. "Nothing luxurious, just safe. My family saved, invested. They set up accounts for me, I didn't flaunt any of it. But he made me feel like he loved me for who I was, not what I came with." Her shoulders slumped. "Now I'm not sure." She told me how Daniel always had big ideas, startups, consulting gigs, business pitches. His enthusiasm was addictive. She believed in him. She supported him. She paid the bills when he couldn't. She saw it as love. "That's what good wives do, right?" she whispered. "They support, they trust. They believe." But over time, the excitement of supporting him became the exhaustion of covering for him. First came the small things, a withdrawal she didn't recognize, a late-night transfer she didn't remember, a credit card payment larger than expected. She tried to ask him. He always smiled gently, took her hand, kissed her forehead, and said, We talked about this already. You're forgetting again?" She closed her eyes when she repeated the line like it was a bruise she'd touched too many times. So I started thinking something was wrong with my memory. I started writing things down in my phone just to be sure. Then she let out a small, heartbroken laugh. "The more I wrote, the more I realized he was lying, not me." She opened her bag again and pulled out a thin lavender folder. This is why I'm here." She handed it to me with trembling fingers. Inside was a mortgage agreement. A second mortgage on her house with her signature, except she had never agreed to any meeting. No bank appointment, no discussion. Nothing. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "We were at the bank a while back for something simple, renewing a deposit. He handed me a tablet and said it was standard paperwork. I didn't see anything, I trusted him. I just signed." A tear slid down her face. "And now my name is on something I never chose. I feel like I'm losing my mind." I didn't interrupt. She needed to pour it out. She continued. "But the worst was the letter." She slid the urgent envelope across the table. Her inheritance account, her trust fund had been accessed. Large sums moved, authorized verbally by Emily. Except she had proof she was on a plane when the call happened. I didn't give permission, she whispered. I didn't even have cell service. Someone pretended to be me. For the first time, she let herself cry openly. I feel stupid, used. And so ashamed because I didn't see it sooner. I leaned forward gently. Emily, what's happened to you is real, it's serious, and it's not your fault. Her chin trembled. He always tells me I'm dramatic, that I forget things, that I twist conversations, so I stopped trusting myself. Then she looked up at me with eyes full of quiet desperation. I don't want to be his bank anymore, Miss Marlowe. I want to know what he's done. I want to protect myself before there's nothing left. And, she hesitated. I want to know if I'm crazy. You're not crazy, I said softly. You are someone who loved deeply and someone used that love as leverage. Her shoulders loosened for the first time since she arrived. A tiny breath escaped her lips, a breath that sounded like the first small spark of hope. And that was where Emily's story truly began. Emily sat across from me, her eyes still glistening from the truth she had finally spoken out loud. People think pain comes with shouting, with dramatic scenes, but the worst kind of pain is quiet. It sits on the chest like a weight, pressing slowly, silently, until a person forgets what normal feels like. I closed the lavender folder she had brought and rested my hands on top of it. Emily, I said gently, I need you to tell me everything, even the smallest details. She nodded, wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat, and inhaled shakily. It started slowly, she whispered. I didn't even notice the pattern at first. I was too busy trying to keep the house peaceful. Daniel hates conflict. He shuts down, so I learned to keep quiet. Her fingers twisted together in her lap, the kind of nervous, repetitive motion you see in people who have lived in emotional uncertainty for too long. She continued softly. When we first got married, we used to sit on the kitchen floor at night, sharing ice cream straight from the tub, planning our future. He told me we'd travel, build something together, maybe start a business. He said he wanted to give me everything. Her voice dimmed on the last word. And then slowly, I realized I was the one giving everything. She shook her head, almost as if scolding herself. I told myself it was okay. I had more savings, more stability. He had the ideas. I had the money. We were a team, right? But somewhere along the way, the balance shifted and I didn't see it. I leaned forward. Tell me about the first moment you knew something was wrong. She looked down at her hands again. It was a late-night bank notification, a transfer of $5,200 at 3:14 a.m. Her breath trembled. He was sitting in the living room. He said he was gaming. I saw the glow on the window. It wasn't a game, it was the banking app. She swallowed hard. I walked over gently. I didn't accuse him. I just asked, "What are you doing?" And he laughed like I was being ridiculous. He said, you know we talked about this. I told you yesterday, you said yes." She looked at me helpless. I knew we hadn't talked about anything. But the way he said it, so casually, so confidently, I started doubting myself. That was the part that always broke my heart, when people stop trusting their own memory because someone they love rewrites it for them. She continued quietly. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Did I forget? Did I miss something? So the next day I checked the statement and highlighted the transfer in yellow. It made me feel a tiny bit in control. Her eyes softened with sadness. And then I started noticing more, the same amount, same random hours, same vague descriptions. Always just under the limit where the bank would flag anything. She rubbed her forehead. I asked him again, and every time he said the same thing. She mimicked his tone, soft, patient, patronizing. Emily, your anxiety is acting up. I told you already, you need to relax. Something in her expression shifted then, not weakness, but anger. The kind that had been buried under years of self-blame. I wish I had seen it sooner, she whispered. But every time I questioned him, he made me feel like I was attacking him, like I was failing as a wife. She exhaled shakily, voice almost trembling. He said I was too emotional. Too sensitive, too forgetful. He said I made things bigger than they were, and after a while, I believed him. Her eyes lifted to mine, and I saw something raw there. Ivy, how do you unlearn believing someone who's been your entire world? I sat back slowly. You don't unlearn it, I said softly. You replace it with something stronger, and that starts today. She nodded weakly, then reached for another document from the folder. This one made me sick to my stomach. It was an online loan statement, A loan she never remembered agreeing to, but her name was on it. Her digital signature, her personal income listed in detail. The debt had been taken out 6 months earlier. I confronted him, she whispered. For the first time in years, I didn't back down. I could almost picture it, Emily standing in her kitchen, hands trembling, voice cracking, but still trying to demand answers from a man who had trained her to doubt herself. What did he say? I asked gently. She gave a humorless laugh. He laughed, actually laughed. He said, You really don't remember signing anything anymore, do you? This is why I handle things. You get overwhelmed? Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but she didn't wipe them this time. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door, she said softly. And for the first time, I cried not because I thought he was lying. I cried because I thought I was broken. I felt my jaw tighten, not out of anger at her, but at him. She continued. That night while he slept, I opened my laptop and went through every statement, every email. I opened drawers I hadn't touched in years. I compared dates, times, signatures. I stayed up till sunrise. She looked at me with hollow eyes. And that's when I realized I wasn't crazy. He was lying. Her voice grew smaller. And if I didn't leave, he was going to take everything I had left. A long silence followed. Then, with a shaky exhale, she said, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I want my life back. I want myself back. I nodded slowly. And you will get her back. Emily pressed her lips together, trying not to cry again. I don't know how to undo all the damage, she whispered. But I know he can't keep doing this. I can't be the wife who apologizes for being robbed. She looked at the lavender folder, then at me. What do we do next? I took a deep breath. Next, I said gently, we follow the truth. And we follow the money. She let out a breath, long, shaky, almost like a quiet surrender. And that moment was the beginning of the investigation that would expose Daniel Carter's hidden world. The day after Emily left my office, I sat alone at my desk long after everyone else had gone home. The city outside was glowing with Christmas lights, soft and warm against the dark, cold night, but the file in front of me felt heavy, colder than the winter air. Sometimes the worst cases are the quiet ones. The ones without police sirens, without shattered glass, without bruises. The ones where the hurt is hidden in bank statements, forged signatures, late-night whispers, and a slow erosion of someone's confidence. I opened the lavender folder again. I studied every highlighted line, every transfer, every signature that didn't look quite right. The numbers didn't tell the whole story, but they hinted at something deeper, something deliberate. And I knew we had to dig. The next morning, I called Emily. When she answered, her voice was softer than the day before, still fragile but steadier, like she had finally allowed herself to believe she wasn't imagining things. Ivy, she whispered, I didn't think you'd call so early. I wanted to start right away, I said. Are you free to talk? She hesitated. Yes, my son is at school. Daniel's working from home, or pretending to. There was a bitter sadness in her voice when she said that last part, like a truth she didn't want to admit but could no longer ignore. Emily, I began gently, I'm going to need access to every account he's touched. Joint, personal, business, anything you have logins for. There was a pause. I think I can get into most of them, she said quietly. I always knew his passwords, he never bothered changing them. He thought I wasn't smart enough to check. The way she said it, like it was something she had heard more than once, made my stomach twist. Send me whatever you can, I said. We'll take it step by step, she exhaled shakily. Okay, I'll do it. After we hung up, I sat back and let out a slow breath. People think lawyers deal in laws, we don't. We deal in human behavior, patterns, motives, lies, fear, and the small decisions that create massive consequences. And Daniel's behavior was forming a very clear pattern. By late afternoon, my inbox filled with documents, screenshots, copies of transfers, emails Emily forwarded from old threads. But there was one screenshot she attached that made me stop. It was from a business account Emily had never seen before. The name on the top of the statement read, Carver Dynamics Consulting. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then my eyes caught the director's name. Daniel James Carver. I stared at the surname. Carver, not Carter, just a few letters changed, close enough to pass casually, different enough to detach responsibility. I dialed Emily immediately. She answered on the second ring. Emily, who is Daniel Carver? There was a long silence. I don't know, she stammered. That's not his name. I explained gently. He registered a business under the name Carver. He took out loans through it. Used your house as collateral. I heard her breath catch. He used a different last name, she whispered, barely audible. Yes. There was a soft sound, a choked exhale, maybe a quiet sob she was trying to hold back. Why would he do that? She whispered. I didn't answer right away because we both knew the reason: distance, blame, escape. A separate identity to shift responsibility when things fell apart. After a long pause, she said in a trembling voice, so, if everything collapsed, my name would be on the house. My name would be on the debts. And his Carver identity could just disappear. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle. Emily, I said softly, I'm not going to let that happen. She didn't speak, but I heard her start to cry again, quiet, exhausted tears, not dramatic, not loud. Just the sound of someone realizing their entire life had been built on sand. I trusted him, she whispered. I trusted him more than anyone, and he was creating a life behind my back with a different name. I listened. Sometimes silence is the only response that doesn't add more hurt. When she calmed a little, I said, I'm going to need you to send me everything connected to Carver Dynamics, every document, every login, every loan statement. Okay, she whispered, I'll try. Emily, you're doing more than trying, you're reclaiming your life. Her breath hitched again. I don't feel brave, she said, voice shaking. You don't need to feel brave, I replied softly. You just need to refuse to keep living in the dark. There was a pause. I want the truth, she said finally, all of it, even if it breaks me. It won't break you, I said. It will free you. Over the next 3 days, my team and I worked through every file Emily sent. Long nights, endless spreadsheets, tracing transfers through digital paths, matching timestamps. Every new discovery formed a clearer picture. Money moved at 2 or 3 a.m., repeated withdrawals just under bank scrutiny limits, payments made to consulting expenses that didn't exist, emails written in her tone. But not by her investment changes. She never authorized loan applications with her financials written in his handwriting, and the most damning pattern. Every major financial decision occurred when Emily was out of town, asleep, or emotionally vulnerable. It was intentional. Calculated, not careless, not messy. This was a blueprint of a man who believed he deserved her resources and believed she would never question him deeply enough to uncover the truth. On the 4th day, as I reviewed yet another forged authorization, I sat back, rubbed my temples, and whispered to myself, he wasn't using her money, he was using her identity. That was the moment the case shifted from confusion to fraud. The next time I met Emily, she looked different, still tired, still hurting, but there was something new in her eyes, something sharper, more alert. She sat down across from me and folded her hands tightly. I found something else, she said quietly, something I think you need to see. She pulled a small envelope from her coat pocket and set it on my desk. Inside was a printed email, one Daniel had written to a private lender. It read, my wife Emily is fully aware of this arrangement. She has agreed to cover repayment if needed. Emily stared at the paper like it was a wound. I never saw this, she whispered. He used my name, my future, my stability. And he didn't even tell me, her voice cracked. I felt stupid before, but now I feel betrayed in a way I don't have words for. I placed the envelope down gently. Emily, this isn't stupidity. This is trust being weaponized. She swallowed hard. What do we do now? She asked, voice trembling. I looked her straight in the eyes. Now, I said softly, we prepare to confront him. Her breath hitched. And this time, Emily, you won't be alone when you face him. The day Daniel Carter walked into my office, the room felt different. There's a certain energy people carry when they know they've done something wrong, and another kind entirely when they believe they've done nothing wrong at all. Daniel walked in wearing the second type, confident footsteps, easy smile, a charm he wore like a tailored suit. He extended his hand to me as though we were old friends. Miss Marlowe, he said warmly, thank you for making time for us. I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. People underestimate how much tone reveals. His wasn't nervous, it wasn't guilty, it was amused. Emily walked in behind him. She looked smaller next to him, not physically but emotionally, like years of being dismissed had compressed her presence. She sat down quietly, keeping her hands folded tightly on her lap. Daniel took the seat beside her, casually placing an arm along the back of her chair, his fingers lightly brushing her shoulder. A subtle, practiced gesture, control disguised as affection. I watched Emily flinch, not noticeably. Just the slightest tension in her posture. I began slowly. Daniel, thank you for coming. Emily shared some financial concerns, and I think it's important we address them together. He laughed lightly. Oh, absolutely. Emily worries too much. Always has. Numbers stress her out. That's why I handle the finances. We've got a system. Emily stared down at her hands. Her thumb rubbed her knuckle repeatedly, a nervous habit I'd seen before. I opened the folder on my desk and slid a sheet of paper toward him. Do you recognize this? I asked. He glanced at it, nodded casually. Yeah, that's part of my consulting business. I felt Emily shift beside him. The name Carver Dynamics Consulting sat bold across the top. Director Daniel James Carver. Why the different surname? I asked calmly. Daniel smiled again, leaning back. Branding, he said simply. Carter is too common. Carver sounds stronger, more professional. Emily's breathing changed. A small, shaky inhale. I kept my voice neutral. And the loans this company took out using your jointly owned home as collateral, did Emily approve those? His smile didn't fade. Not yet, but it paused, the way a song skips for half a beat. Of course she did, he said lightly. We discussed everything. Emily finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. No, Daniel. We didn't. He tilted his head and let out a small, patronizing laugh. Come on, you don't remember half the conversations we have about finances. You get overwhelmed. Her shoulders stiffened. I wrote everything down, she whispered. Everything, dates, times, what you said, what I said. I wasn't forgetting, you were lying. His expression changed, and not in the way guilty men change. Guilty men pale, they panic. He looked irritated. Emily, he said sharply, you're embarrassing both of us. You do this. You twist things. You make drama out of nothing. Drama, nothing. Words meant to shrink her. She lowered her eyes, but I wasn't going to let the moment slip. Daniel, I said, sliding another document forward, did Emily authorize this $70,000 transfer from her trust fund? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I already explained that, he said. She gave verbal authorization. She was part of this. She was on a plane, I interrupted gently. 30,000 feet in the air, no Wi-Fi, no calls. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, the charm flickered. But he wasn't done performing. You're really going to take her side? He asked. She's been anxious for years. Her parents filled her head with doubts about me. They always wanted her with someone richer, someone boring. Someone like them? Emily inhaled sharply, hurt flashing across her face, so I leaned forward. Daniel, this isn't about anxiety. This is about forged authorizations, midnight transfers. A second mortgage signed under misleading circumstances, and a business identity created under a false variation of your surname. His eyes darkened. You're twisting this, he said quietly. Emily looked at him, then really looked at him, and her voice shook as she spoke. You used my name, she whispered. You used my accounts. You used my future, and every time I asked questions, you made me feel stupid. He turned to her, voice softening. Baby, I did all of this for us, for our family. You don't understand how much pressure I'm under to be successful, to be worthy of you. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Making me doubt my memory isn't love, she whispered. Stealing from my trust fund isn't love. Signing loans behind my back isn't love. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. That surprised him. For a moment, his control slipped. What do you want then? He asked tightly. You want to ruin our marriage over a few financial misunderstandings? I answered for her. She wants the truth. He looked at me, annoyance barely hidden. The truth. The truth is she panics, she forgets, and she's letting you push her into destroying everything we built. Emily shook her head slowly. No, Daniel, I'm realizing we didn't build anything. I built it. I held us together. I paid for everything, and you chipped away at me piece by piece. His face hardened, but the charm returned like a mask being placed back on. Emily, he said softly, I love you, you know that. You're overreacting? That was the final straw. Emily lifted her chin just a little, but enough to shift the room. No, she said quietly, I'm waking up. He stared at her, confused, thrown off, not used to this version of her. You can't just turn on me like this, he said. You're my wife. And not your bank, she whispered. A silence settled between them, a heavy, unmovable silence. I closed the file. Daniel, we're going to need full financial disclosure. I said calmly. Every account, every loan, every document, and until then, Emily will be protecting her assets legally. He snapped his gaze toward me. You're manipulating her? I'm supporting her, I replied. He looked back at Emily. You'll regret this, he said quietly. She met his eyes for the first time without fear. No, she whispered. I regret staying quiet for so long. That was the moment I knew the case had shifted. She wasn't the trembling woman in my doorway anymore. Something inside her had cracked open, not in a way that broke her, but in a way that freed her. And Daniel, for the first time, realized he no longer controlled the narrative. After Daniel left my office that afternoon, the air felt heavier, almost as if his presence had left behind a residue of tension that clung to the walls. I watched the door close behind him, his footsteps fading down the hallway, each one slower than his confidence had promised. Emily stayed seated. She pressed her palms flat on her knees, grounding herself, breathing in and out like someone who had just run a marathon without moving an inch. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were brimming, but not with fear anymore. It was something else, something like dawning certainty mixed with grief. I didn't expect him to lie so easily, she whispered. Then corrected herself softly. No, I did expect it. I just didn't want to believe it. I leaned forward gently. You saw who he really is today, Emily, not the man he pretends to be. She let out a shaky laugh, the kind you release when you're exhausted down to your bones. It's strange, she murmured. For years, he made me feel like I was the problem. But today, watching him twist everything, watching him say those things so calmly, I realized he believes his own lies. That was the part that hit her hardest. Not the money, not the loans, not the signatures, but the ease with which he rewrote reality. She looked down at her hands again, her fingers trembling slightly. What happens now? She asked softly. I pulled a new file from my drawer. Now, I said, we build your protection. Her eyes lifted, cautious but hopeful. We're filing motions today, I explained. We'll freeze anything he can manipulate. We'll notify every lender, every bank, every institution. We'll document every transfer, every forged signature, every lie. We are taking control of the narrative before he can twist it again. There was a stunned silence. She whispered, I didn't know I was allowed to do that. You're allowed to do more than that, I said. You're allowed to reclaim everything he convinced you wasn't yours. For a moment, she closed her eyes, and I saw it, the beginning of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Strength. Over the next week, my office became a war room. Piles of documents lined my desk. Forensic accountants examined every transaction. We traced digital paths from bank apps to IP addresses. We reconstructed timelines, compared signatures, matched inconsistencies. Every night, long after the building emptied, I found myself combing through another set of transfers Daniel made at 3 a.m., another email written in a tone that mimicked Emily's, but not enough to fool someone who was looking closely. One night, around 11 p.m., I received a voice message from Emily. She sounded tired, like the day had worn her down to her rawest self. Ivy, I'm sitting in my kitchen, staring at our Christmas decorations. I bought them. I hung them, I planned everything for our son, and Daniel, he just walked past them like they're invisible. He hasn't asked how I'm doing. He hasn't asked why we met with you. He's acting like nothing happened. Her breath caught. He told me earlier, we'll get past this, Em. You always get emotional and then you calm down. Like this nightmare is just a mood. She paused, voice trembling. I don't know how someone can look at the woman he's hurting and still pretend nothing's wrong. I listened to the message twice. It wasn't the content that struck me. It was the tone, the quiet shock of a woman realizing she had been living with a stranger. The next morning, I called her. Emily, I said softly, you're not reacting to one betrayal. You're reacting to the thousand small betrayals you trained yourself to overlook. She didn't speak. But I could hear her breathing change, the way someone breathes when they suddenly feel understood. Meanwhile, Daniel became unpredictable, not outwardly, not violently. He wasn't the kind of man who yelled. He was worse. He became kind. Too kind. He started cooking dinner, started leaving coffee by her bedside. Sent her long messages about remember when we were happy. He even brought home a small Christmas gift for her, a necklace she once said she liked. This is what emotional manipulators do when control slips. They shift shapes. Emily told me, her voice breaking, he hugged me in the kitchen yesterday, Ivy, but it felt wrong. It felt rehearsed. Because it was, I replied gently. She sniffed softly. He asked if I wanted to watch a movie later, the same movie we watched on our first date. He said, let's not let a little stress ruin us. A little stress? The disbelief in her voice was painful. I feel like I'm waking up in a life that isn't mine. Because it isn't, I said quietly. He built it around your silence. Behind the scenes, the financial picture grew darker. We discovered that Daniel had applied for 3 more loans in the past year, small ones, mid-sized ones, all connected to the Carver alias or their joint accounts. And each loan listed Emily's income in perfect detail. He knows everything about me, she whispered when I told her. My passwords, my accounts, my credit score, my trust fund, and he didn't use any of it to help us. He used it to secure himself. One-sided sacrifice is not love, I said. It's exploitation. She lowered her head slowly. I thought marriage meant supporting him, she whispered. I just didn't know I was supporting him alone. One afternoon, when she came into my office again, she looked exhausted, like the weight of years was pressing down on her shoulders. She sat slowly, clutching her coat around her even though the room was warm. I went through our closet last night, she said softly. Our Christmas ornaments, photo albums, gifts he gave me over the years. And I realized something. I waited. He never bought a gift that wasn't discounted or using my money. He never planned a trip that he paid for. He never provided, not once. Her eyes filled. And yet, I always felt guilty for wanting him to try. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Do you know how many times he said, I'll pay you back when my business takes off? I used to smile and say, of course, love. Now I realize he never intended to. I nodded slowly. He didn't marry a partner, I said quietly. He married a safety net. Her lips trembled at that sentence, the truth hitting her somewhere deep, somewhere tender. I don't want to be that anymore, she whispered. You won't, I said. We're almost ready for court. Once we file, everything changes. Emily inhaled shakily. Thank you, she said softly, for believing me, for hearing me. Daniel made me feel like my voice didn't matter. It matters, I said, and soon the court will hear it too. The morning of our first court hearing was cold, colder than usual, even for December. The kind of cold that settles into your bones and refuses to leave until something warmer pulls you back into yourself. Emily arrived early. She stood outside the courthouse in a long gray coat, her hands tucked into the sleeves, her breath forming small clouds in the air. Her eyes were distant, focused on a place somewhere far beyond the courthouse steps, as if she were still trying to make sense of how her life had brought her here. When she saw me approaching, she gave a faint, nervous smile. Morning, she whispered. Are you ready? I asked softly. No, she said honestly, but I'm here. That was enough. We walked toward the building, every step echoed. Her heels clicked on the stone, steady but hesitant, like she was walking into a past she wasn't sure she had the strength to face, and a future she wasn't sure she deserved yet. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper, polished wood, and that unique sterile chill that every courthouse carries. Clerks moved quickly between desks, lawyers hurried down hallways with files tucked under their arms, and somewhere in a nearby courtroom, a judge's gavel struck louder than it needed to. Emily's fingers brushed the sleeve of my coat, subtle and light, the way a person reaches for something steady without wanting to admit they need it. My hands are shaking, she murmured. That's normal, I said gently. The important part is you're here, she nodded, exhaling slowly. We sat on the long wooden bench outside courtroom 14. The same bench thousands of people have sat on before, each with their own story of love, loss, betrayal, hope, and everything in between. Emily kept her hands clasped tightly in her lap. He's going to twist everything, she whispered. He always does. And I'll untwist it, I said. She gave me a tearful, grateful look. Then the courtroom door opened, and there he was, Daniel. Walking toward us, he wasn't nervous. He wasn't scared. He wasn't even pretending to be. He was smiling. A soft, sympathetic smile, one that said, I forgive you, even though she wasn't the one who had done anything wrong. He said gently, as if they were meeting for brunch instead of a legal confrontation. You look beautiful. Emily froze. She didn't say thank you. She didn't smile. She didn't move. She just stared at him with an expression I had never seen on her before, something between grief and clarity. He stepped closer. Come on, he whispered. Let's fix this. You know we don't belong here. This is all a misunderstanding. His voice was soft, rehearsed, designed to slip under her ribs and soften her resolve. But Emily didn't soften, not this time. She stepped slightly behind me just enough to show him she wasn't there on his terms. Daniel blinked. Confusion flickered across his face, followed quickly by annoyance, then by something even more dangerous, confidence. The judge called our case. We entered. The courtroom was bright with fluorescent lights that washed out everything warm. Emily sat beside me at the petitioner's table while Daniel sat across the aisle, adjusting his tie, still smiling faintly. The judge, a calm, gray-haired man with a reputation for spotting deception, looked at us over his glasses. "Mrs. Carter," he said kindly, "are you prepared to proceed?" Emily inhaled slowly. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. That alone was strength. I stood, opening the binder we had prepared, thick with documents, highlighted statements, screenshots, IP traces, loan applications, forged authorizations. I laid the first set of papers before the court. "Your Honor, we are presenting evidence of unauthorized transfers from Mrs. Carter's accounts, forged financial authorizations, and assets leveraged without her informed consent." The judge reviewed the papers. Daniel leaned back, completely unfazed. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "my wife and I discussed all of this. She has been very stressed for months. She forgets things. She misunderstands. I would never do anything without her approval." The judge looked at him evenly. "Do you have documentation of these discussions?" Daniel smiled. "No, but we're married. These things are understood." "Not in a court of law," the judge replied. Emily's fingers squeezed the edge of the table. Then came the turning point. I presented the Carver Dynamics documents. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Mr. Carter," he said slowly, "why is your surname listed as Carver in your business registration?" Daniel's entire posture stiffened. "It's just branding," he said quickly. "Marketability? And why was your home used as collateral? Did your wife approve this?" "Of course she did." "Can you show evidence of that approval?" Daniel hesitated. He swallowed. Silence filled the room, thick, telling, and sharp. Emily shifted slightly, her voice small but steady. "Your Honor," she said, "I didn't sign anything for that business. I didn't approve the loans. I didn't even know about the name change." Her voice trembled on the last word. Daniel cut in, sharp and dismissive. "She's just overwhelmed. You have to understand she gets emotional, her anxiety." The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Carter, do not interrupt your wife." Daniel sat back, his jaw clenched. The judge continued, flipping through pages. "Mrs. Carter, we have call logs showing that an authorization for a large trust withdrawal was made at a time when you were on an international flight. Can you confirm you did not make that call?" Emily nodded. "I couldn't have, I was in the air." The judge turned slowly to Daniel. "How was this authorization obtained, Mr. Carter? The voice on the recording identifies itself as your wife." Daniel's face paled slightly. I don't know, maybe she used Wi-Fi, maybe she forgot." The courtroom fell into a tense silence. Then the judge said something I could tell Emily had been needing to hear for years. "At this stage, the court sees substantial indicators of financial deception and potential coercive control." Emily's breath hitched. Not because she didn't know, but because someone else finally said it. Daniel frowned deeply, leaning forward. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We're married. Marriage means trust." The judge looked at him calmly. "Marriage does not negate consent, Mr. Carter." Daniel's mask cracked then, just a little. He wasn't smiling anymore. Emily wasn't trembling anymore. And for the first time in the entire case, I saw the balance of power shift. From him to her. When we walked out of that courtroom, Emily paused in the hallway, leaning against the wall as if her knees had forgotten how to function. But her eyes were different, not scared, not confused, not ashamed. She looked awake. "I didn't know a judge could see me like that," she whispered. "He saw the truth," I said gently. She nodded slowly. Maybe I'm not as weak as he made me believe." "No," I said softly. "You never were." She closed her eyes. A tear fell not from pain but from release. And that was the moment I knew Emily had finally stepped out of Daniel's shadow. In the days after that first hearing, something in the atmosphere around the case shifted. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but in small, undeniable ways, like the way snow begins to melt after a long winter, even if the air still feels cold. Emily called me 3 nights after court. Her voice was quieter than usual, but steadier. "Ivy, something changed," she whispered. "I don't know how to explain it. I'm still scared." But I'm not scared of him anymore. It was exactly what I had been waiting to hear. What happened? I asked gently. There was a pause, the soft sound of her trying to gather words she wasn't sure she had. He came into the living room tonight, she said slowly. He put 2 mugs of hot chocolate on the table. He sat next to me and said he wanted to talk. And I didn't feel that panic I usually feel. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I owed him anything. I could hear the tremor of realization in her voice. I just looked at him and thought, "Who are you?" She let out a shaky breath. He started saying things like, "We can fix this. You're overreacting, it's Christmas, families stick together." And normally I'd fold, I'd soften, I'd worry I was being cruel, but tonight, I watched him talk and I realized he wasn't apologizing. He wasn't sorry. He just wanted me to stop fighting. Her voice lowered. He wants the benefits of me without the burden of honesty. I closed my eyes, hearing the truth she had finally allowed herself to speak. That's because he's losing control, I said softly. People like Daniel don't apologize, they strategize. She swallowed. I think I finally see that. There was another pause, then she whispered something that cut deeper than all the financial documents, all the forged signatures, all the evidence put together. I thought he loved me. I took a breath before answering. Emily, he loved what you made possible, that's different. She didn't speak for a long moment. I didn't rush her. Then she said, I want to move forward with everything, whatever it takes. I'm done protecting him. That was the turning point. Not the signatures, not the loans, not the court, her decision, her clarity, her refusal to shrink. The next week was a blur of preparation for the full evidentiary hearing. My office buzzed with activity, paperwork, motions, financial reports, witness lists. But beneath the legal mechanics, there was something emotional happening. Emily was changing. The woman who once apologized for breathing too loudly now walked into my office with a quiet determination. Her posture was straighter, her voice firmer. Even her eyes looked different, no longer clouded by confusion. One afternoon, as she reviewed documents with me, she paused and said quietly, You know what's the strangest part, Ivy? I'm grieving someone who's not dead. I'm grieving the man I thought he was. I set my pen down and looked at her. That grief is real, I said, because the version of him you loved never existed in the way you believed. She nodded slowly. I'm starting to understand that. But Daniel was unraveling, not in obvious ways. He didn't lash out, he didn't yell, he became desperate. He sent Emily long voice notes late at night, soft, emotional messages saying things like, I miss you in our bed. Why are you doing this to us? You're letting strangers tear us apart. You know I'd never hurt you. You're not yourself, Em. You're letting them brainwash you. Classic manipulation. Classic gaslighting. But Emily didn't fall for it this time. Instead, she forwarded every message to me, almost clinically. Almost like documenting the behavior finally helped her see its shape. Then came the moment that revealed everything. 3 days before the hearing, Emily showed up at my office breathless, shaken, but not broken. I need to show you something, she said, closing the door behind her. She handed me her phone. Daniel had sent a long text. Em, I need you to trust me. If you keep pushing this, the banks will investigate. We could lose the house. We could lose everything and it will be your fault. Just sign the papers I left on the kitchen counter. It's the only way to fix this. I looked up at her. Papers? She nodded. I didn't sign anything. I didn't even open them. But Ivy, he said, it will be your fault. He's still trying to make me carry his consequences. I shook my head. No, not anymore. She let out a shaky breath, half relief, half devastation. He really doesn't think he did anything wrong, does he? No, I said gently. He thinks he's entitled to your life. Her eyes filled again, but this time with something stronger than sadness. Resolve. The morning of the full hearing, Emily walked beside me with calm purpose. Her hair was tied back neatly. She wore minimal makeup. She carried nothing extra with her, no purse, no documents, just herself. Daniel stood at the courtroom entrance waiting for her. When he saw her, he smiled. Em, he said softly, don't do this. Come home, we can work this out. She stopped, not close to him, not far either. Just enough distance to speak the truth. I'm not coming home, she said quietly. And this time you can't talk me out of reality. Daniel stared at her, stunned. He wasn't used to this version of her, the version that didn't shrink. The version that didn't apologize. Then he whispered, You'll regret this. Emily looked at him with eyes that were no longer scared. No, she said, I regret every time I believed you. When she turned and walked into the courtroom beside me, Daniel didn't follow immediately. He just stood there, still smiling, but barely. The kind of smile a person wears when they feel the world slipping from under their feet and don't know how to grab it back. Inside, as Emily took her seat, she whispered, "I don't feel like the bank anymore." "What do you feel like?" I asked. She wiped a small tear and whispered, "Like myself." And that was the moment I knew she was ready for whatever came next. The courtroom was unusually quiet the morning of the final hearing, so quiet you could hear the shuffle of papers, the soft click of a pen cap, even the gentle hum of the heater pushing warm air into the room. Outside the windows, snow drifted down in slow, thoughtful spirals, covering the city in a white stillness that felt strangely fitting. Emily sat beside me, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Her breathing was steady. Her shoulders relaxed. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked like a woman who wasn't bracing for impact. She was ready. Daniel entered a few minutes later. His confidence was still there, still stitched into the way he walked, the way he held his chin slightly higher than necessary, but something in his eyes had changed. They looked tired, a little hollow, like charm alone couldn't save him anymore. He sat at his table, straightened his tie, and forced a smile in Emily's direction. She didn't look back. The judge reviewed the thick file of documents in front of him, weeks of work, months of paper trails, and years of patterns laid bare. He turned to us, his voice steady. "We are here to finalize the findings in the matter of Emily Carter versus Daniel Carter." Daniel leaned forward slightly as if preparing to interrupt. Emily didn't move. She didn't need to. The truth finally had its own voice. I stood first. "Your Honor, we have presented evidence of repeated unauthorized transfers from Mrs. Carter's personal and inheritance accounts, evidence of forged authorization calls, a business identity created under an alternate surname, and loan applications signed without her informed consent." The judge nodded slowly. Daniel rose quickly, a little too quickly. "Your Honor," he said with forced calm, "my wife is confused. She's been under a lot of stress. She forgets things. I've supported her through so much." "Mr. Carter," the judge said, not unkindly, "this court has reviewed audio logs, timestamps, digital signatures, financial trails, and your explanations do not align with the evidence." Daniel tightened his jaw. "She's exaggerating," he snapped. "She's doing this because her parents never liked me. They poisoned her against me. She's not thinking clearly." Emily finally looked at him then, not with fear, not with softness, but with a heartbreaking clarity. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I thought for years that I was the one forgetting things. I thought my memory was broken. I thought my emotions were problems. I thought I needed to be better for you." Her eyes filled, but not with tears, just truth. "You taught me to doubt myself every time I questioned you. You made me believe I was the unstable one, but I wasn't. You were lying. And now everyone can see it." Daniel's expression twisted, hurt, anger, disbelief all tangled together. I loved you," he whispered. Her voice softened, but it didn't break. "No. You loved having access to me?" The judge cleared his throat and began reading the final decision. "After thorough review, this court rules in favor of Mrs. Carter. Her remaining inheritance accounts will be restored to her sole control. All loans acquired through Carver Dynamics are assigned solely to Mr. Carter. Mrs. Carter is absolved of any responsibility for debts associated with the unauthorized use of her identity and financial profile." Daniel's head snapped up. "You can't do that," he said sharply. "That's unfair. We're married. Marriage," the judge said patiently, "does not entitle one spouse to deceive or financially exploit the other." Anger flashed across Daniel's face, raw and unfiltered. "So that's it," he hissed. "Years of supporting her emotionally, and I get punished because she's dramatic?" I stood slowly. "Mr. Carter," I said quietly, "you didn't support her, you drained her. And when she asked questions, you convinced her not to trust her own mind." Emily whispered something then, something just loud enough for him to hear. "You broke me quietly, Daniel, and I rebuilt myself quietly." A silence filled the courtroom. Not empty, not cold, but full of something final, like a door closing, softly but permanently. Daniel turned toward her with desperation creeping into his voice. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked. "Where does this leave me?" Emily took a breath, steady, calm, strong. "It leaves you with what you created," she said, "and it leaves me free." The judge adjourned the hearing. Emily stood, Daniel didn't. He just watched her walk away, watched her step into a world he no longer had access to. A world she was finally allowed to enter without guilt, without manipulation, without carrying his burdens like her own. When we stepped out into the courthouse hallway, the cold air met our faces again. Snow was still falling, soft flakes settling on Emily's coat. She stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. For a moment, she simply looked around at the city, the sky, the gentle whiteness covering everything. She whispered almost to herself, "I didn't think I'd ever feel light again." I stood beside her quietly. "You earned this," I said. "You walked through the hardest part?" She shook her head softly. "No, Ivy, I walked through the hardest part with my eyes closed. Today I walked with them open." She closed her eyes briefly, letting the snow land on her cheeks like tiny blessings. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. It was the final separation agreement signed earlier that morning. She looked at it, her breath trembling just slightly, and then she folded it gently and tucked it away again. "This," she whispered, "is the first Christmas in years where I don't feel like Collateral." A single tear slid down her cheek, not from sadness, from release, from freedom. Her phone buzzed inside her coat, her son's name flashing on the screen. She smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from the center of a person instead of the surface. "I should go," she said softly. "He and I are baking cookies tonight, a new tradition." She turned to me. "Thank you for giving me back the person I thought I lost forever." "You didn't lose her," I said. "She was buried, you dug her out." Emily exhaled, and something unspoken lifted off her shoulders. Then she walked down the steps into the falling snow, quiet, steady, unbroken, and that was the end of Case 17. A story of love turned into leverage, a story of manipulation hidden behind marriage vows. A story of a woman who finally realized she wasn't a bank, a burden, or a blurred memory. She was a person, a strong one. And when she chose herself, the truth finally chose her too. "My name is Attorney Ivy Marlowe," I said in the closing narration, "and this case taught me that the most dangerous wounds are the ones inflicted softly, and the bravest women are the ones who finally say, no more."